place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Living Free podcast, where we talk about building a life without limits. Today is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025, and this is episode 1006 of the Living Free podcast. And I'm excited today to talk to Sue Zoldak, who I've known for years. And as I conceived of changing how our Tuesday shows go to really focus in on freedom journeys, building freedom into your life, choosing the life you want to live, and those sorts of things, and different ways to tap into the counter economies and those sorts of things, Sue was an obvious choice of somebody to just hear her journey story. So we're going to do that today. Before we do that, though, I want to thank two sponsors. And the first sponsor today comes in a really happy cup. It's Hollow Roast Coffee. You can get marvelous handcrafted coffee that's roasted to order over at hollowroast.com. We also have K-Cups, which are not roasted to order, but I do produce them in small batches, so they stay about the freshest you can get on the market. That's all over at hollowroast.com. Our second sponsor of today's show is the Self-Reliance Festival. That's right. We haven't talked much about it, but it is October 4th and 5th in Camden, Tennessee. And we will be launching later today 100 tickets at the lowest price they're going to be for the whole sequence of tickets being rolled out as we put together this event. We've queued up some awesome speakers, and it's going to be at a new location. Cool thing about the location is that you can rent RV camping spots and some other stuff. So it's a little bit cushier. Check that out, selfreliancefestival.com. Tickets are launching at 1 p.m. Central. With that, I want to say, Sue, welcome to the show. And the camera's here, but you're down there on my computer. So, guys, if you see the top of my head, that's why.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. It's always so much fun to talk to you and to your audience.
Well, I'm glad to have you on today. We scheduled this like a month ago, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought, like, we talk a lot about homesteading and people building their homesteading off-grid lifestyle. Tell people, first of all, I'm not going to have you do like who is Sue Zoldak and what do you do? Well, that'll just come out today. But describe where you live right now and like what your perfect day where you are is like.
Well, welcome to my homestead. No, I live in Manhattan. And prior to that, I lived for 20 years in Washington, D.C. And New York and Washington, D.C. are actually very different. I go back and forth between the two, sometimes several times a month, just taking the train. But currently, I am in my apartment with my daughter. We live on the Upper East Side in a what's called a pre-war co-op. And so this building was built in, I believe, 1920. And there's 12 units. So we don't have a doorman. It's just kind of what you consider, it looks kind of like a townhouse, but you walk in and there's 2 units on each floor and there's 6 floors. So
that's really cool. So that's not the typical homestead setup, is it?
No, it isn't. It's a very typical traditional New York City setup. So that's what we have.
Why on earth would you want to live like that? I mean, like the world is ending.
Well, what I love about where we live now, we used to live on the west side of town, where the blocks are a little bit further apart, and we used to live in like kind of a modern high rise, but we moved from that to this 1920s co-op because literally on my block is everything I need. Like I can get to a Staples and back to my house in 15 minutes of walk. I'm saying round trip. I can get a Starbucks in I've timed it 4 minutes round trip out of my door. So I just walk half a block. I can send a FedEx. I can go to, I have a bank. My bank is on a 1 block this way and 1 block that way. So I actually have 2 bank branches within a block. Literally anything, grocery shopping. There's a Target, there's a Best Buy. And it just, to have all of that literally within a block radius, in addition to just all the restaurants and other shops, is just, it's just crazy convenient. We're also 1 block from a subway line and a bus line that takes my daughter to school.
Okay, so this is a very different way to build resilience through community, guys, than what we talk about on the homestead. But think about what Sue's saying. Like, everything she needs is within one block.
Mhm.
Now, there may be weaknesses with that model, but it's also a
So
strength in a lot of ways, right?
it definitely is. I mean, I still, order my Amazon and stuff like that, so I'm not lugging, this many paper towels down the street. But I could if I, a lot of people have, we have these like pulley carts that a lot of people use, obviously, to do their grocery shopping. But literally, there's, either whether it's between, Instacart or Uber Eats or just me going outside, I'm really not more than an hour away from literally anything. There's a Barnes and Nobles 2 blocks away. I mean, like you could test me right now. Like
what, Barnes and Noble
thing
is
that
still in
I could get,
business?
and I will like run out and get it and be back in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So with that in mind, how do you like integrate? Because I know you're like an advanced pantry manager too, which is not what people would expect out of somebody who runs ad agencies and communicate like your whole empire. But you are like, how do you integrate that into a small living situation?
It's definitely changed. So what Nicole is referencing is when I lived in Northern Virginia and I had a garage, I had this elaborate, I would say elaborate, I call it efficient pantry management system. And my rule was that you had to have 3 of everything, 1 inside the house and 2 in as backup. So let's say it's a specific light bulb you need, right? There's 1 that's functioning and at least 2 in the garage or wherever you're storing it. And that's because if you break 1 or you need 1, there's 1. And then when there's 1 left is when you restock, right? Or before that. You never wait till you run out of something to restock. You have to train yourself to restock when you're no more than on your last one, and that last little soldier standing on the shelf is telling you order more of me. So not only can you like snap a picture of it, be like, what light bulb is it specifically, or take it to the Home Depot and match it up, but if you run out and the 1 is in the ceiling, that's when you're like, gee, I forgot what light bulb that is that goes in this weird thing in the ceiling. So my pantry management really came from 1, being a single parent and being a woman, and 2, just saving time, right? I never want to run around looking for something desperately at the last minute. And so that kind of, sits within where I am now, where I feel protected a little bit by never being really far away from something if an emergency arises. But, my goal with pantry management, again, is still the same, even though we just stock less of things, right? Is that you're never down to your last item. And so it's important to kind of know how often you go through things like aluminum foil or laundry detergent, toilet paper, to kind of just have a sense of like, how fast does our household go through these things, so that, you're not, I call it kind of like just burning my life energy, right? That I'm not burning my life energy thinking and worrying about those things, because I really honestly do not have room to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have another adult. Well, now I do. I should say my daughter just turned 18, but raising her, it's not like I had another adult who could go run to the store while I'm doing something else. And so it was just really important, just as a security factor, but an efficiency and just, being calm all the time. I never spent weekends, running errands. That's my time to relax. And I hate to spend that running around.
Yeah. So despite living near Washington, D.C., you didn't panic about toilet paper during the great toilet paper panic of 2020, did you?
I not only did I not panic, I was driving around with toilet paper in the trunk of my car and I drove into DC to give some basics, toilet paper, paper towels, some hand sanitizer, all this kind of stuff to one of my friends who lived in DC, and she couldn't find any nearby. She's immunocompromised. I didn't want her shopping around to a bunch of different stores. So not only did I never ran out of stuff during COVID, because I actually had like an entire closet full of toilet paper and all that stuff. I mean, the benefits of having a house is that you have kind of this extra room, right? Which I fully took advantage of, So, people were coming to like shop from my house. And, they were really grateful, but I was like, they're like, are you sure can't, like, we don't want to take your like last, roll of paper towels. I'm like, it's definitely not my last roll of paper towels. I had Clorox wipes. I had everything that no one had. And people are like, where did you get this? I'm like, my closet,
Closet. Yeah. Yeah.
It did pay off. And I also did have, through networks that are familiar to you, a freedom network they were kind of ahead of the curve. They kind of warned everyone to stock up on things. We had all stocked up on even things like cold medicine, Tylenol, that we were afraid, there might be a run on even those things. So, and we didn't know at that time, like, is that going to help? But, the thought was if you had a fever or a cough, like maybe it helps to have cold medicine, at least you can sleep or that kind of thing. So even before people started getting sick, I was going to CVS even and, loading up on some things.
Yeah, I think my family thought I was magic when I was like, this is the list of things you need to get in California today.
Mm-hmm.
And well, because I started agitating days in advance. And I was like, no, today you're going to the store and you're getting it. And like I nagged them enough that they did. And then the next day it was like, everything was shut down. And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, well, because I've been reading about it in the back channels with that network you're talking about for a while now. And at first I was like, maybe it won't happen. And I was like, oh no, here it comes. Here comes the wave. So
yeah, I mean, I think at that point, everyone was like better safe than sorry, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the worst case
is $200 on making sure your supplies are shored up is a low risk thing if it's things you're going to use. Anyway.
Right.
So, yeah. Spending $40,000 is a totally different scale, and maybe you should think about that.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't like I was building a bunker, I
mean, I live in a bunker. Okay, so let's go back to Sue Zoldak before you did your agency launch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did your life look like then?
Yes. I've been running my own company this is actually the 9th anniversary. It might be today.
And it's the year of 9s.
So
that's big.
I believe it was February 16th that you and I sat down together.
It's our anniversary.
It is our anniversary of that conversation, not the anniversary of when we met. But so when I worked at an agency, you don't control your own schedule. Not only can people put things on your calendar, right? You come, what we were, talking about before, you come to work thinking you have 2 meetings, but, you have actually 4 meetings. Like you don't actually even control your blocks of time to a certain degree. And you don't necessarily control the projects that you work on or the clients that you work on. And so it was also, obviously at that point, most jobs were fully in person. And, it felt like I would sometimes miss, seeing my daughter go off to school and miss seeing her come home in the afternoon. I had to have a nanny. At one point I had a live-in nanny, but, or at least somebody who came, picked her up, met her at the bus stop, and I wouldn't be home till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. When she was even younger, when she was in daycare, it's that like panic drive where you have to get there. If you're a minute late, they start charging you like $100 a minute. I mean, literally, right? They start penalizing you in a big way. And, with Washington, D.C. traffic being the way it is, there was always just this stress in the afternoon. Like, I've got to get there at, 5:59. And you would never know what would happen. And I realized some things you realize in retrospect are adding so much stress to your body and your life and your mind. And so when I went out on my own and I realized at 3 o'clock, I can go and stand at the bus stop, and at that point, my daughter was older and she didn't need that, she didn't need as much attention than when she was, 6. But it just felt good to be there. And it's like, why shouldn't I be there, and be able to work a full-time job? So,
Right. So really, in summary, you were working a successful job, making good money
mhm.
at an agency, but it was also a struggle because you didn't have control over your own time, and
Mm-mm.
your personal priority is your daughter, right?
It should be, right? It is.
Yeah.
I mean, while I'm proud of being able to, tell people stories, like I've had meetings where I had a client in Las Vegas and then a pitch in Washington, D.C., flew the red eye, did the pitch, flew back to Las Vegas to take that same client out to dinner. I've done, days and weeks like that where I have, different suits hanging in different hotels across the country and in my office and, flown around, I actually used to fly to Connecticut and back in a day and have the town car pick up my daughter at daycare on my way home. I was able to really push the limits of that and really arrange things. I was privileged enough, senior enough to be able to do that. Did my daughter enjoy being picked up in a black SUV? No, she did not. She felt like that was a little embarrassing.
Oh.
But that is the way, you maximize everything. You try to make everything as efficient as possible, because people would say, how do you do it? How are you a single mom, do this high powered job, you travel a lot, you have a daughter? And I'm like, well, you should see my itinerary capabilities of being able. I was like, I was in Chicago this morning, now I'm at home, right?
Like, I have lots of clothes strewn all over the country so I can look professional.
I
Yeah.
mean, if I have to leave something, in a hotel and go to another city for the evening and then go back, I was fully capable of doing that. And I just became a travel warrior and also just really efficient using the resources around me. Something that we've talked about is time management and what is your time worth, right? Things like, should I drive myself to the airport to save, getting an Uber ride? But if I drive myself, I also can't use that time to finish emails or make phone calls or look over my things, or I'm further from the door. I have to walk, sometimes at some airports, 30 minutes from the parking garage, or you wait for a shuttle for 15 minutes, you this, you that, it's 30. You don't realize all this time that you can save versus waste, right? You don't think of that 30 minutes waiting for the airport shuttle. I always use this example, versus getting dropped off at the door, because you took an Uber. That's hours out of my week, right? Hours.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
and then so
you
you know
ask
what?
yourself, like, did I save $10 or did I waste an hour, right?
Right. And then if I pay myself $75 an hour or some arbitrary number, like that cost me money.
Right. It's always about opportunity cost. It's always about opportunity cost. And I think that is true whether you live in Manhattan or you are running a homestead, right? What are you doing right now? Is it worth your time doing versus either hiring it out, asking someone to help you, upgrading technology or machinery, right? And you always, as a business person, we're always making those decisions. I mean, it's like a tale as old as time, right? And I think a lot of people think it's always better if I do it hands-on myself. If I fix it myself, if I do it myself, if I drive myself, that's always the cheapest and therefore the best way. But it's not the cheapest, because you're expending, again, your personal human capital, your mental capacity, your physical, capacity. And if that half hour was going to help me close a $10,000 deal, there's no way in heck saving the parking or whatever it is made sense for that half hour.
Yeah, I think so. Perspective of Sue, when you worked for the agency, like why did you stay there so long? Was your mindset like I can't, or was there any of that going on in the background?
I never, which is crazy, because every young person you talk to today is like, I want to run my own company. I want to be, an entrepreneur. I want to be an influencer. Like, every single young person goal is to work for themselves. But in my generation, I'm Gen X, just to clarify, that was not, top of our mind. That wasn't, some people would say, like in their high school yearbook, like, I want to own a business. But I would say the majority of people did not say that when I graduated high school, for example. That wasn't on people's minds. The traditional thought was you work yourself up in a career industry, right? And also, I really enjoyed learning from mentors. That's something that has helped me so much in my career, and by really carefully choosing where I work. So I worked at 3 agencies prior to starting my own, and I chose them for their leadership, for the people there, and for what I felt like I could learn at each place. So I stayed in the industry world for so long because that's how I got to be me. Right. And a lot of people ask me that question, like, how can we be you? How can we start our own business, be a thought leader, be seen as an expert, be well known, be on speaking, stages. And they're like, is there a book I can read or a class I can take? And I'm like, there really isn't. You just have to live the life, right? I can't distill it down to a book. You're not going to be me by just reading a book, because I learned from the best, and with intention and with careful planning and dedication. And I think people who do that, finding the right people to be with through your journey in life, that's how you become successful.
Absolutely. We were talking about AI before we launched, and something I'm doing this month is an AI challenge where every day for 10 minutes, we have a prompt they give us and we mess with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned a ton with it, but what's more important is it's been every day.
Why isn't that a live stream?
Yeah. Oh, there's some balloons. I need to turn that off. But it would be a funny live stream today. Like yesterday's, because I'm a day behind because they release it at 8 my time, and my allocated time for that is 6 a.m. And so it was take a picture of anything handwritten and then have it try to transcribe it. Like, it's a really simple thing, but each week we'll start with something like that. And then by Friday, it's put all of them together into this big helpful thing. So, but I think, going back to with purpose, when you want to learn something, learning from the experts, it's worth the investment of $100, which is what I've paid to take the challenge, to do it for 2 reasons. 1, I'm invested, so I'm doing it. And 2, like, I know that in that area, I was not as strong as I needed to be. So, will this teach me everything about AI? Absolutely not. But it opens more, like when you start getting into something, it opens more doors, which sounds like that's what you did with your career.
No, absolutely. You always have to be learning. I'm learning now. I'm getting my executive MBA, but it's and I obviously learn from all the events and classes and from the people around me that I interact with in my network. You always want to think about, how can I level up, right? And that is really by being intentional, like you said, doing your research, looking for a program, looking for something, but also choosing the area in your life where you feel like leveling up will give you, an advantage. There's a book called Good to Great, and the philosophy is that it makes a huge difference to take somebody who's like a B level at something to an A, right? It doesn't make that much difference to take someone from like a D to a C. Unfortunately, you're never gonna, let's say the skills basketball. If you're a D basketball player, getting you to a C level basketball player, like, what is that going to get you? But if you're a B level basketball player and getting you to an A plus level basketball player, that might open up a huge amount of opportunity, and it may be very worth, the blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not saying it's easy, but it might very well be worth your while to invest that. And so the key is figuring out what are the areas in your life that you can go from good to great, right? And that's going to pay off, and that's where you should be putting your time and energy.
And if you are a D level anything, then the question is it something you should learn how to be better at, because that's just reasonable for you? Or is that an area you might want to outsource?
I think obviously these are personal decisions, and obviously these scales are relative. We're not saying it's relative to your own other skills, right? So we're not saying you're, necessarily that everybody's D level at basketball is the same. It's relative to the other things you're good at, right? It's like if you're an A level at baseball, but you're a D level at basketball, it would be weird to say, I want to spend all my time training up my basketball skills because I just don't want to play baseball. I mean, that's a tough decision, for people to make, right? And you have to really think, is that the right decision? Like, it's better to take what you're best at, and really hone that, or really dedicate that time to, right? But it's about choosing how you spend your time. It's about again, it boils down to opportunity cost.
So what did it take for you to decide, that's it, I am launching Zoldak Agency? Like, tell me about what your headspace was like, maybe the month leading up to that move.
So I just felt like it was time. And, for probably like 6 months before, I had worked on a website, got a logo designed. I wasn't really sure if I was going to do it. But, me being the prepper, I guess, the planner that I am, I thought whether I do it or not, I'm not going to be that person who goes out there and says, website coming like that, because I'm in the business of branding and communications and websites and all that stuff, of creative. I thought that is not the best way to put the best foot forward if I were to launch a company at all. So I had bought all the URLs, got all the emails set up, had a logo designed, had a website. I just didn't make any of that live. I had business cards printed. And then when I finally decided to go out on my own, it was really because of my clients. Someone who was counseling me with that group of clients that was in that network, in that Freedom Network, said, we would really like to be able to hire you by yourself without kind of the overhead and weight of your the company that you work for, which is very expensive. We had an expensive minimum monthly retainer, which I, had to try to get around for my clients who wanted obviously a smaller commitment monthly. And it was that kind of pressure that said, these are your clients and we want to hire you. And that's also how I ended up naming the agency after myself, which is a lot of people will say never do that, because then you can never transition the brand, to be separate from you. And that is a problem that I've had a little bit. But the reason I went ahead and chose the Zoldak Agency was because I knew that the reason people would want to hire me is because they wanted to know that they were hiring me and not me working at another agency. So if I named it anything else, I would still have to have this explanation of, but this is me and just me, even though it's called X, Y, and Z. And it's always better to do less explaining. So,
Yeah. Okay, so it's not just you anymore, though.
It isn't. It isn't. There's a lot of people that, I have in my Rolodex that help me as contractors, have a couple full-time employees. But at the end of the day, I'm still kind of the main touch point for all of my clients, which is either good or bad, and I haven't taken on partners or anything like that. Which again, it gives me more control over what I do, and less having to deal with a business partner, which is a true headache, to be honest. I think a lot of you guys know that, the more partners you have in a business, the more time you spend of your day discussing things with your partners and less time doing actually what you want to do. And so it's, I've grown it in a way that maybe, it wasn't meant for rapid growth. Like I'm never going to get to 100 staff. And so, those are choices I think about. Those are definitely choices. There's always a fork in the road, so to speak, an alternate you that, did something differently and has a completely different result at the end. And nobody's without that. You can't get away with not having those thoughts.
So then we ended up at that fateful day where I was just in town. I think that was the last time I came to DC to try to make the relationship with that specific client work. And I had realized that day after my meeting with the new person who'd taken over the department I was working under as a contractor, it was clear to me by the end of that it was going nowhere. So I was like sitting there going, well, that's a bummer. It's clear to me I can't be here anymore. And I meet you for coffee having no idea. And you're like, I just quit my job.
I did. Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't had I say this to my daughter. She also hates this. I go, I haven't had a paycheck since then. And she's like, stop, you can't say that. But it's true. It's very different when you're getting a set amount of money and benefits, on the 1st and 15th or whatever it is, and not, right. It's a whole different vibe, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. So what did you feel like that day? Were you like frightened or anything, or
A
was it
little
like,
bit.
woohoo?
I was a little bit frightened, but again, I was truly lucky in the fact that I had business cards. I had 3 clients that had brought into my the agency I was working at, and all of them signed releases to come to me. So I think I had a rare situation where I launched a business with 3 clients. And we were going into the field actually with a campaign in Tennessee, actually that Monday. And so I launched a $100,000 ad campaign. I left, the agency on Friday and launched a $100,000 ad campaign on Monday. And I had to actually get, the client had already paid for the media buy. I had to get that money from my previous agency and transfer it to my, so there was a lot going on that weekend.
Yeah, they loved you that weekend.
But, the point is, again, it's just like, picking up my daughter after being in Connecticut in the morning and getting to Washington, D.C. You plan it out down to the minute, right? You think of all the different things that could or couldn't happen, and you make it work, right? There's no obstacle or no logistics that I can't overcome, right? And that's the mentality in which I live my life. Like, there's absolutely, like, what, you think that's impossible? No, not only is it not impossible, like, I've already done that 5 times, So there's no such thing as impossible. That's definitely something, as a business owner, as as a single parent, like, there's nothing you could ask me to do that I'm going to go can't do it. I'm going to think about it. Right? Maybe I don't want to do it, but.
Well, how would you describe your mindset on that day versus you're now like 9 years in?
Right.
How has your mindset changed?
Wow, that is a really good question.
It's a big, deep question. I should tell a story while you think about it, right?
Yeah, right. No, how has my mindset changed? I mean, there's lots of different levels to answer that question, right? There's obviously financially, there's emotionally, but I think mindset wise, I think it's about really believing in yourself, right? Really saying, people do want to hire me. I don't need to rely on other people. I mean, remember, I had built up my career learning, choosing mentors. And it's really about realizing that person's you now, right? You're that person. And it's really hard to say that. It seems arrogant. It seems obnoxious to, level yourself up to the people that you were, looking for to build your career, who you thought were, greats and giants in the industry. But you kind of have to, I hate the phrase fake it till you make it, but you have to believe in yourself is the way I'd rather say it, right? Because faking it implies that you really don't know what you're doing. And that's not the case. I think a lot of times people know or can know what they're doing, but they don't believe that they know what they're doing. And so you take that uncertainty and disbelief into everything you do, right? You doubt yourself, you doubt your choices, you second guess yourself. And, when you run your own business, you can't do that. You have to make decisions quickly. You have to make decisions with finality, knowing that there's consequences and being able to accept those consequences. It's on your head. And I think just telling yourself you have the strength to do that is really important. You don't need someone else to tell you have the strength to do that. I mean, I did have someone else tell me that I had the strength to do that, which obviously helped. But 100 people could have told me that, but if I didn't believe them, right, or I feared it, I wouldn't have been successful. So at that point, you say to yourself, "It's me. Like I'm ready to be that person who, has a reputation." I had one point in my life, I had had some goals in the back of my mind. My mentors, they had some of the campaigns they worked on written up in a textbook, which is how I found my first mentor. And he had also had a PhD dissertation written about one of his campaigns. So now at this point in my life, both of these things actually have happened several years ago. There's a quote of mine on page 1 of a textbook that's used to teach a college class on campaigns, and I have had an entire PhD dissertation written actually on this campaign in Tennessee and the Hall tax campaign.
Oh, the infamous Hall tax campaign.
Somebody wrote their PhD on the campaign.
Can you get rid of property tax here too, please?
I could try.
It's going to cost more than $100,000, isn't it?
It's so, like you start checking off these things that you thought were impossible or far away, or like you thought you had set these really far away goals. But then you come to realize those things just happen. They have happened. They're actually in the past for me now. And so the point is, like, you just have to believe in yourself. Like those things I thought were kind of end goals, they didn't end up being end goals. They were just kind of middle of the way things that happened.
Yeah, it seems like you need to believe in yourself, but also with an element of reality, right? Or openness to, if I've made the wrong decision and the consequence I got was not what I wanted, like, be ready to make the next decision to deal with that and not dwell on the fact that, oh no, I failed. Because what I see in a lot of like successful people is they fail all the time, and they're, well, that didn't go as I wanted it to. Okay, I'm going to do this other thing now.
Yes.
They don't stay over there in oh crap mode.
No, you can't. You really can't. I mean, the phrase, fire quickly, hire, slowly is a phrase in business for a reason. Again, it's the same philosophy as good to great. It's you don't dwell on something that's mediocre to bad. You can't have that time in your life wasted that way. You have to quickly decide, where is that good to great that I can go again and launch something else. I mean, I always think, like, what if I wasn't doing my job? Would I be able to be, in a completely different career, in retail, in interior design, and, a lot of art that I'm really interested in. I have this dream of like retiring and like remodeling little Victorian doll houses. I mean, it's crazy. You always have to have something in the back of your mind that it's like, I have a lot of other things that I could do or want to do if I had the time. And you just have to be okay with that. You have to be okay to pivot.
Yeah. And I think pivot's the key word. And really, if you do something that's a fail or a half fail, it's the question to ask is, what can I learn from that? And is it that I need to go back and redo the same thing better? Mm-hmm. Or do I need to realize that thing's not my thing? Because that's how you find, a lot of people are like, how do I find my career, side hustle, business, project, passion? And until you start trying to do things you don't, unless I have a dog that's very vocal right now for some reason, but can you hear her?
I can a little bit. Tiny bit.
Yeah, I may walk around and feed her. I think that's what's going on. But not she. So, but that's the thing. It's like, if you don't try things, you don't know. And then when you try something and it's very clearly not a you thing, but you didn't know until you tried it, you don't have to just keep beating that drum until you're so bored that you're going to die, basically, in your head.
It's important to have somebody, a confidant that you could talk to, or good friends even that you could ask, like, for true honesty and advice. Like, am I good at this? What am I good at? What do you see as my best talents? In my career, I've had several executive coaches, who I'm grateful for. And those sessions are hard. I mean, those people are there to tell you what you're worst at, right? Or, where you really need to change, where, it's not like going to therapy where they purposely don't want you to leave more depressed than when you came. But with an executive coach, I mean, that's the thing. They're like, if you can't fix this, you're not going to move forward, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to tell you the honest truth of what's wrong with you. But you need that. And you have to have the fortitude to be able to withstand that kind of feedback. If you're the kind of person that can't listen to that, either from a friend, a family member, and you explode, or you have a hard time receiving that kind of coaching or feedback, that's actually probably the first thing you need to change.
Yeah. And how do you change that, really?
You have to, I think, start with, I know I love these things. I know I'm supported by these people. I know I'm good at these things. You have positive things about you. I believe that that's the case, and getting feedback is really just about, refining the edges, right? And it's that those little tweaks that make people go forward. And the thing is, like, if you think people like Steve Jobs or, Mark Zuckerberg didn't take harsh feedback from the people around them, I'm telling you, they absolutely did. I mean, Steve Jobs got fired from Apple. Let's all recall this, right? Because he wasn't doing a good job of leading it at some point in his life. So you have to be able to take it, right? I mean, there's, these documentaries. I actually really love, there was a Showtime documentary on the founding of Uber. And, when you try to start up a company, you do all kinds of things that you would never want to do when you're actually in the middle of running a company. And it's not the best startup story, but when you want to be a disruptor, you have to do some things. But, when you watch the founding of Uber, you have to think, did that person take in enough feedback from the people around him, right? Was he willing to take feedback? He had a lot of investors and employees that try to tell him certain things, and he didn't listen. And eventually he was ousted from Uber, right? So, would you call that a failure or a success story? I still consider his story a success story, right? But it's tough. Like, don't think it's easy to succeed, right? You got to fight for things that you believe in, but you also have to be willing to admit that when you're totally wrong to the point of being removed from your own successful company, right?
Right. Probably still making money from it.
Or doing something else. They pivoted to doing something completely else and invented something else, right?
Yeah. Okay, here's a question from Arthur Leslie. Has there been a shift in your industry since the election? How's the last 3 weeks been for you,
Which
Sue?
election?
You know which election.
No, I don't, because it's too soon for this election to have any effect on my industry, the one that just happened. The election, I would say, that had the most impact on my industry is the 2016 election. That was the year, if you recall, that there was something called the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where a group of researchers who was doing a project was able to openly, not illegally, use Facebook data because a lot of the data was open. And that was also the year that people started this discussion of whether there was Russian influence, buying ads, getting into our social media, creating profiles, pretending to be American, and ad nauseum times a million, right? And posting on things, because they have the bandwidth to have people create literally millions of profiles and just comment on things. That was the year that all that started bubbling up. And so as a consequence of that year, Facebook had to start an entire kind of election integrity department, as did all the others. They disconnected the pipes that connected Cambridge Analytica, but as a result of that, that also changed the ability for me to target on Facebook. On Facebook, you used to be able to select all these targeting capabilities.
Yeah, I remember the good old days of targeting.
After 2026, you were not. You had to come with your own data.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but that was the beginning of a huge change in not only how we saw election integrity in the digital age be, something that we had to really pay attention to. And that really changed my industry more than anything. And I think people still grapple, obviously, with that today. Do we trust what's on the internet? Do we know whether foreign countries are trying to influence opinion in our country for one reason or another? I would say that's really the biggest fear. I mean, people talk a lot about election integrity within the United States, right? I will say one thing. I do not think our voter files are accurate in any way. Do I think that people vote when they're dead? 100% I do. 100%.
110%.
110%. There are some parts of the country that have are 110% registered to vote, meaning there's 110% people on the voter rolls compared to eligible people, right? So do we have a problem, a data problem in that sense? And do people try to take advantage of that? Yes, that is a problem. But I think a bigger problem is our international friends.
Gotcha. So it has been a bit of a wild ride for 3 weeks from a headline standpoint. How does that influence Sue Zoldak's day to day? Does it impact you at all, or do you just kind of ignore it and go on with your life?
One thing that it will impact is that, we try to make sure people have a plan if they are a brand or an organization that's mentioned by the president or by Elon Musk, whether in a positive or negative way. A great example of that was during the campaign where Donald Trump made a stop inside of a McDonald's. And he, asked to work a shift. McDonald's are individually owned franchises. So the campaign arranged that with that particular store owner. But McDonald's headquarters put out a statement the next day, a really well-worded statement. I would say this is like a PR masterclass, saying that, they welcome people of all types, political parties. Kamala Harris is just as welcome to come to a McDonald's as Donald Trump. And, we're here to make people happy with our Happy Meals and to serve burgers, because, they don't want it to seem like, well, did McDonald's do this guy a favor? Like what happened here? They don't want it. McDonald's does not want to get into a political war, right? But they didn't know. They also didn't, headquarters, I don't think necessarily knew that was going to happen, or maybe they knew it was going to happen, but they didn't know what the feeling or outcome of the public would be from it. But you have to be ready for that in today's age. So whether that is, just being ready for positive or negative media of any kind, it's the same thought. You prepare for a crisis before you have a crisis. You have to think of every possible crisis that you could have. And for anybody, even, for those of you that produce food, for example, you need to know what to say if somebody accuses your food of being bad or, not processed correctly or whatever it is. Don't wait till somebody makes that accusation or reports you to the FDA or whatever it is, your local governance, to have an answer to that. You need to know, how do we source our ingredients? How do we, make sure that, food is safe? Have all of those talking points ready. You don't have time. You absolutely do not have time to do that research and try to, come up with a response, because you need to have that response immediately, right? Within minutes or seconds of somebody accusing your company of doing something wrong. So it's the same philosophy, be ready. So that's one of the things that we, obviously having someone like Donald Trump and now with Elon Musk making a lot of changes, you need to be ready to respond and act with that. Having a hissy fit, which a lot of people have had on social media, is probably not in anyone's, best interest. A lot of people have written some nasty resignation letters, with some swear words in them. I mean, is that how you want to be remembered? You may think you're doing a good for society by confronting things that you don't like that way. But I always caution again, like, in a few years, are you going to regret that you went on a Twitter hissy fit about it? You really need to think, right? You really need to think about how you're going to react. So that's the biggest thing. Otherwise, to me, politicians are just a cycle, a revolving door that comes in and out, right? My career is based on how do we succeed with messaging and communications despite the cyclical nature of politics or just public policy. So to me, it's a revolving door. It's always going to go up or down in certain ways. In 4 years, we're going to have a different conversation. And really, in 4 years starts like in another month or two. So, in about, next year, so the middle of next year, we will be talking about the next presidential election cycle. People are already working with candidates who are running for senator in 2026, those campaigns, and conversations have started. So we're always a little bit ahead of what's happening and planning ahead. So in my mind, I don't necessarily think about today as much as I think about tomorrow.
So do you want to look at McDonald's crisis communication plan really bad after that situation?
You should really Google that letter that they put out, I believe, on all their social medias. It's, to me, that was a PR masterclass. It's like, Donald Trump came to your store, right? And that half the country is going to love that, and the other half are going to be like, we boycott, right? I mean, that's the tendency today, is just take it to the extreme, even though that ultimately most of the time hurts not the person you're trying to hurt. But given that volatility of the public and also kind of the mob mentality of the public today, you have to be ready for anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I actually should go check that out. I noticed that the McDonald's thing happened, but my coping mechanism for not making decisions out of fear is to not participate actively in the day-to-day political drama of candidates running for office. It actually, I used to be way more up on the what was going on day to day, and now I'm like, so 2 weeks ago this thing happened. Now I'm going to actually learn about it, because I feel like for the first week, the articles I read about executive orders or changes being made seemed to be reasonably balanced, and they also ended up changing back to just like, oh, this one's from Fox News and that one's from CNN. But for a minute there, it's like news organizations were shocked into balance, or that's my confirmation bias. I don't know which, but I was all excited, and then I was like, never mind, this is crap reporting again.
No, it's crap. It's the media as a whole, I think, is the most corrupt industry of anything that we have in the United States. I mean, obviously, this is my personal opinion, but if people think the White House is corrupt, or Congress, or big business, no, I will tell you, in my opinion, knowing what I know, it's the media that is our most corrupt institution. And by that, I mean, they just can't tell the truth, or aren't willing to find out the truth, or they've decided the truth before they've written an article. There's so many ways to influence the public. I mean, even the way they place articles on a page, whether, this article about Donald Trump doing something good is just really hard to find. But this one thing about, it amazes me what gets put out there. And that's because I know what's really happening, right, in Washington, D.C. from the people who actually do those jobs, right? My network is filled with people at think tanks, people at, inside, Capitol Hill, inside the White House, inside, all the actual people that are doing the work. And maybe that's why I'm not as panicked, because I know that a lot of what's being reported is kind of this outer hubbub. A lot of it is ceremonial, but I know people who are actually, writing, statistical analysis about floodplains, or, whatever it is. They're doing the actual work. They're figuring out how to improve, GPS signals in airplanes. These are the people I know, right? And I know that they're doing good and positive work. What the media says about these events is such a surface level of what's really going on, and the complexity. For example, with the plane crash, I'll give that as an example, the complexity of the things that go on in aviation, the public knows little about. And I only know this much because I worked on an FAA contract in the past with a company called Harris, and they build datacom and GPS, the technology that goes into airplanes to keep them communicating with towers. They build ground tower communications. And the fact is, the media has done an extremely poor job, even of just explaining how planes know where they are and where other things are, right? That would have been where I started reporting, right? Like, let me explain to you the technology we have, how many airplanes have that, where we are in the progress of that. I mean, a lot of people don't realize some planes don't have GPS capability. I made a joke on Facebook the other day. I go, if we had put a Tesla in the back of each of those aviation instruments, they would have had better crash detection just by turning on a Tesla in each cargo hold, right?
Yeah.
Airplanes are not as sophisticated. Unfortunately, you think, what? How can this be? Airplanes are not as sophisticated as you think. And now they're saying, for example, it's because the helicopter couldn't hear that last response.
Oh yeah, I heard the live press thing this weekend where they were saying the transmission, like the most important words, never came through.
Heard. But again, if I was the media, I would have started this by saying, let me explain to you that a lot of airplane avionics communication is still based on non-digital, meaning radar and voice. Okay, analog communication is still where we are with aviation. And to explain to people the difference, like I worked on a contract where we were selling what they call datacom. Datacom is the equivalent of text messaging. Okay, so in my lifetime, just, less than 10, a little over 10 years ago, we were still trying to create a system where a pilot could send a text to an airplane or the tower, vice versa. Now, if they had done that to the helicopter, then hearing would have been, your analog wouldn't have been an issue, right?
Right.
We can't do that system to system yet. And again, so, whose fault is it? It's nobody's fault. We just haven't upgraded the technology, okay? And that's just the bare bones truth of it. But that's an example of me kind of knowing a little bit of inside baseball of how the industry works. But the media just wants headlines, right? The media just wants someone to blame. Is it this? Is it that? Is it Biden? Is it Trump? Is it Elon Musk? I mean, good Lord, it's not Elon Musk. Okay, I'll tell you that. I mean, again, if you put a Tesla in every plane, we'd all be safer. So
they'd have to talk to each other, though.
Well, that's the thing that all the Teslas do.
Yeah, I know, but
our airplanes do not.
Yeah, well, and that's not a surprise if you think about the age, like the number of years between the oldest plane in operation in the U.S. and the newest plane, right? It's way more years than you would expect.
It is. A lot of the planes we're flying on are 20 plus years old, but also, they're built differently for each company. They're teched out differently. And obviously there's many different kinds of airplanes. And again, I know this much about this. I'm in no way pretend to be an expert. I worked with a whole room as the only woman, surprise, in a whole room of literal rocket engineers. As the communications, I was there in case of crisis, right? I just sat there and twiddled my thumbs because all these PhD engineers says, well, nothing bad's ever going to happen. I'm like, are you sure?
Sure? So, I'm here in case it does.
I'm only here in case it does. I twiddled my thumbs though for a
while. Well, that's good to know. Okay, well, back to building the life that you want without limits. What advice do you have for people who they know they want something else? They don't quite know what it is, like to get started on that journey.
That is a really hard question too, because I'm kind of at that midlife crisis journey myself. My daughter is about to go to college, so I will be an empty nester come fall, which is creeping closer and faster than I ever thought possible. And also, I've been running my own business for a long time, and there's certain things I miss about being a part of a big company, which is one, being part of a big company, not being the person that decides on all the operational things. That some of that takes a toll on you mentally. And at some point you say to yourself, is that what I want to do forever? Is there something else? I recently talked to, another person who I've known for nearly 20 years, and he's honestly said the same thing to me. He goes, I would love to pick your brain a little bit because I think I'm at the point in my career where I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And some of it is it, I'll admit, is it the politics? Yes, it's a little tiring, working in politics, can be a negative experience. Let me just say sometimes.
That's the change I ever made, Sue.
I mean, but I'm kind of at that place now too. And I think really, it still goes back to me, have good mentors, talk to people, get good people around you. Don't keep things to yourself, have people you rely on that you can have this conversation with. And I think, my example of having someone in my network coming to me and wanting to chat and us being soundboards together, these are the only things that get me through, is knowing that I always can pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Now, this is very different than having a large group of friends. This is about having a network who does what you do, right? And I think what Nicole does here with this Living Free in Tennessee community, that's always been your attention, to build a network. Why? Because you realize that without a network, you can die alone out there. And, I mean that in a philosophical way, in a physical way. If you don't have people to help you, there's only certain things. I mean, you go on these weekends where you put up a barn. You can't put up a barn by yourself. You can't even build certain IKEA products by yourself. It comes with a warning that says this can't be built by one person, because they're so big that you need one person holding up something while you're operating the screw. That is a metaphor for life, okay? There are just some things, even though it's meant to be easy, like IKEA, that even IKEA will tell you, hey, you need help.
Call
Okay,
a friend. Call a friend.
Don't even try doing this by yourself. Do not buy this. Do not bring this home if you don't have a friend, right? It'll never go together. We're telling you right now, because you're just going to yell at us and call us and be mad, but we're going to say, we told you so. So the thing is, you have to realize to be successful, you can't do it alone. And that doesn't mean like having business partners. That means having a strong network. So I would say 20 to 30% of your time in your daily life should be spent networking. And that means giving back to the network, as well as knowing how to ask for help, taking from your network, right? I color code my calendar with different colors. So every entry has a different color. Blue is for client work. Orange, I believe, is for business development. Yellow is for networking. Green is for personal. And so that I can look at a glance at my calendar at a weekly or monthly basis and know if I'm off balance, right? Sometimes I do too much networking, which means I let go of too much of my calendar space for other people to make lunches and meetings. Like I can't eat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a coffee every day. I wouldn't get any work done. But it helps me know that I've reached some kind of balance. Am I doing too much client work versus not doing enough business development work? What if I'm not doing any business development? I have no pipeline, right?
Yeah, then it's like, whoop, there's the end of it.
So I've learned kind of a mix for that, and I do that by color coding, but it's the same thing with your life. Success doesn't mean you spend 100% of your time head down working on your business.
No, it did last week though. But yeah.
Well, sometimes,
but in the long run. Did you hear this? A CFO friend of mine driving through town to get away from the cold in New York, because I understand it's very cold there. And so she was staying on my property, reorganizing all of how we have everything tagged in QuickBooks for my company so I can see better profit and loss by business unit. I call it business unit, which seems like an overglorified word for the different things I work on, right? But I swear she thought she was going to be here for 2 days. She was here for 4 days. And every single day, aside from making content, I was like answering questions or coding things. That's this. And, down to like that $7.25 charge is this, which, as you know, I hate that, but 100% worth my time, because the insights it's giving me this year are necessary to success in the business.
Well, I mean, you identified a blockage, right? Something that has to be done in order for you to reach the next level of efficiency. And as much as sometimes we hate whatever that thing is, whether that's hiring someone, firing someone, fixing your books, if you identify that point, that inflection point, unfortunately, life is not all fun and games.
No. And then because my head was in like right brain function, I think is what that would be, right? Is that right or left brain?
That is right brain. Yep.
Huh? Left
right brain. Yeah.
Right
left
brain.
is your creative.
That's what I thought. So it was right brain function. And when I'm there, I'm literally, you could have asked me I'm a very creative person. Any question about creativity last week was like, I don't know. But 1 + 1 is 2 today. And that's what I know. But I unveiled another important habit I have that has to change in order for the community to grow. That has nothing to do with bookkeeping. And I was like, that's because I was just in right brain land for so long. It became apparent that creative Nicole was making a bad decision about this one habit. So, yeah.
Well,
which is the email habit, by the way.
I mean, it's important for everyone to know how their brains kind of bifurcate. So for you, that right and left brain has meaning to you, right? Of kind of changing the way your mind works and what tasks to take on. That may not be true for everyone, but I do encourage people to really look at how do you function best? Are you best in the morning versus afternoon? Are you best, keeping all right brain things together and then all creative and brainstorming things together? Are you, whatever that bifurcation is there, you have to be able to have a bifurcation. And then you have to ask yourself, how fast am I able to transition from one to another? Because that mental weight of switching from one type of activity or thinking to another is heavy between certain bifurcations and light between other bifurcations that you might have. You need to be, again, self-aware of that, right? I am someone that can switch from task to task really easily, from client to client. I can be 1 minute writing a press release for the FAA and the next minute talking about gummy vitamins. I can do that on a dime, but I know that about myself, or maybe I train myself to be that way. So I know I don't have a lot of friction between having back-to-back meetings from A, B, C to a networking group to a conference planning. That doesn't get me. But there's no good or bad about that, right? If you're a person who's not good at that and you need a day where you're doing this type of work and this type of work, the most important thing is for you to identify what kind of person you are. Don't just let things happen to you. Do not just let your day or your week or your business or your customer drive you and your day. If you feel like somebody is pedaling the bike, it's not your bike, it's not your company, it's not your life, right? It's not your day. And so the most important thing about being successful, I think, is I'm fully control my day. I know how to handle my logistics. And because I can do that, that is frictionless and worry-free and not tiresome. I purposely don't do things that I think are exhausting I don't do that to myself. Don't let your job do that to you.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was assessed as somebody who can switch tasks very easily. It's 100% true as long as it has nothing to do with numbers. But the minute it has to do with intense numbers, that's like the zone. So when I do my taxes, it's like the zone, and all I can think about are taxes for the next week until they're done. So now I know that, and it's like, okay, so I just actually literally need to block days to do that stuff, and then it's done. And then I can go back to being like flittery Nicole.
But imagine if you didn't listen to yourself that way. Imagine if you were like, you fought that instead of using it to take away friction and take away stress. You fought that and said, I'm going to I can't do that, with my schedule. It has to be an hour across, 1 hour a day for a month. I'm going to do my taxes, knowing that you hate to do your taxes that way. And imagine the friction that will cause not only in your day, but how loss of output you would have over that month,
Like the 15 to 20 minute transition time on that one is a loss of 15 to 20 minutes every single time. So if you're doing a little bit every day on that, for me, it's not it's not good.
Every 10 or 15 minutes matters when you're running a homestead, running a business, whatever it is. It's not too small to think, how can I shave 2.5 minutes, off of this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. If people want to get involved with you, hire you to do their stuff, which they should totally do, how do they link up with Sue?
So my website is the zoldakagency.com, and you can find me there. You can email me. It's really easy. It's sue@zoldakagency.com. So the email doesn't have the in it, but because it's my name, you could just Google Sue Zoldak and you'll see multitude of websites that will reach out to me. I want to give a shout out to AJ with his Simmerwell bone broth. For those of you that didn't know, I worked with AJ on not only the logo and the brand, but the website. So it is a Shopify. It's actually a Squarespace, but it works like a Shopify website. So I helped him set up all the shopping carts and things like that. So if you're interested in that kind of digital work, Simmerwell.com is an example of the work I did within your network here. But also if you just have questions about, that business executive mindset or how to make the best use of your time, I'm happy to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for making time today, Sue.
Thank you, Nicole. It's always so fun to catch up with you.
Yep. All right, folks, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at where? HollerRoast.com. to consider becoming a member. Our member webinar is Sunday at 6 p.m. for the month, and it's all about care and cooking with cast iron. Check that out at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week.
Bye, everyone.